Study Session 14. Mills. Utilitarianism. Introduction. James Mill was an English philosopher. He was the father of another English philosopher, G.S. Mill. James Mill met with Jeremy Bentham in 1808 and became an ardent disciple of utilitarianism. His writings helped to clarify the philosophical and psychological basis of utilitarianism. He groomed his son, John Stuart Mill, into an ardent apostle of utilitarianism. John Stuart Mill, in his own contribution to utilitarianism, introduced the harm principle, which maintains that every individual has the right to act the way he wants, so long as his actions does not harm others. Though he excluded young people and slaves from his harm principle, he called for extreme liberty. However, he also posited that irrespective of the liberty people enjoy, society should not allow people to sell themselves into slavery. He advocated for free speech and against censorship and women marginalization. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to distinguish between James Mill, John Stuart Mill, and Jeremy Bentham. Explain the harm principle of John Stuart Mill. Distinguish between Jeremy's utilitarianism. And lastly, explain why Mills opted for representative government. Utilitarianism. James Mill, 1773 to 1836. James Mill was born in Scotland and graduated from Edinburgh University, where he studied for the ministry. He became a Presbyterian minister in 1798, but left ministry in 1802 in order to become a journalist. He established his reputation as a writer with the publication of A History of British India in 1817. This won him a job with the East Indian Company in 1819. He headed the company from 1830 until his death in 1836. He met Jeremy Bentham, the father of utilitarianism, in 1808 and became an ardent disciple of Bentham. His writings helped clarify the philosophical and psychological basis of utilitarianism. He was the author of Analysis of the Phenomena of the Human Mind, 1929, The Elements of Political Economy, 1821, Fragment on Macintosh, 1835. He died in 1836 after grooming his son J.S. Mill in utilitarianism. See World Book Encyclopedia 1993. John Stuart Mill, 1806 to 1873. John Stuart Mill was the son of James Mill. He was born in London and was educated by his father, James Mill. By the age of 14, he had mastered Latin, classical literature, logic, political economy, history, and mathematics. He entered the East Indian Company as a clerk at 17. He became the director of the company and retired after 33 years of service. He married Harriet Taylor in 1851 and served as a member of parliament from 1865 to 1868. He was associated with the Liberal Party. He advocated for women's rights. He authored System of Logic, 1843, Principles of Political Economy, 1848, Utilitarianism, 1863, On Liberty, 1859, The Subjection of Women, 1869, and Autobiography, 1873. See World Book Encyclopedia, 1993, and Sabin and Thorson, 1973. On liberty, Mill introduced the harm principle, which posited that an individual holds the right to act as he wants so long as his actions do not harm others. If the action is self-regarding, that is, if it only directly affects the person undertaking the action, then society has no right to intervene, even if it feels that the author is harming himself. See Rosen F. 2003 and Chin Liu T. 1980. He excluded young people and those living in backward states from this his idea of liberty. He opined that such people should be dictated to. He also cautioned that irrespective of the liberty enjoyed by the people, society should not permit people to sell themselves into slavery. Mill also advocated for free speech. He argued that free discourse is a necessary condition for intellectual and social progress. He thus encouraged that people should air their views. He called for a restraint and limitation on the power of the government and the execution of society's mandate without hesitation. See Mill, J.S. 2002. Mill is also against censorship, slavery, and the subjection of women. See Chin Liu T. 1980 and Convicts and Murphy 1948. Mill versus Bentham. Bentham's prescription of utilitarianism is the greatest happiness principle, which maintains that one must act so as to produce the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people. Mill's own contribution is his argument for the qualitative separation of pleasures. Bentham treats all forms of happiness as equal, whereas Mill argued that intellectual and moral pleasures are superior to mere physical forms of pleasure. Mill also distinguished between happiness and contentment, and claimed that the former is of higher value than the latter. He captured it this way: it is better to be a human being, dissatisfied than a pig satisfied. Better to be Socrates, dissatisfied than a fool satisfied. See Rosen F. 2003, Trinley T. 1980, and Sabian and Thorson 1973. Furthermore, in attempting to distinguish between higher and lower forms of happiness, Mill maintained that those who have experienced both tend to prefer one over the other. He went further to argue that simple pleasures tend to be preferred by those who have no experience with high arts and are therefore not in proper position to judge. On the form of government, Mill opted for a representative form of government, which would guarantee freedom and liberty. His fear was not of state repression, but of a majority that is intolerant of the unconventional, that looks with suspicion on divergent minorities, and is willing to use the weight of numbers to repress and regiment them. See Sabian and Thorson, 1993. Summary. James Mill met with Jeremy Bentham and became an apostle of utilitarianism. His son, John Stuart Mill, also became an apostle of utilitarianism. J.S. Mill introduced the Ham principle to utilitarianism. He advocated for free speech and liberty. He also was against censorship, slavery, and subjection of women. J.S. Mill advocated the qualitative separation of pleasures. He also distinguished between happiness and contentment. He opted for a representative form of government which would guarantee freedom and liberty. End of study session 14. Thank you for listening.